Welcome back to Techi. In this video, we will understand about Exchange disaster recovery site. We will see why disaster recovery site is necessary, what components must be protected, and how to plan it. So let's see what is disaster recovery site and why it's matter. Imagine your main Exchange server data center goes down due to the power failure, hardware crash, fire, or any kind of a reason. Your users can't send or receive emails. That's where the disaster recovery site or DR site comes in. A disaster recovery site is a secondary Exchange environment located in a different physical location, sometimes in another city or data center, and its job is to keep your email services running if the main site fails. The goal isn't just a backup, it's a kind of a continuity that you may not face any downtime. For example, if main site 1 is offline, user can still access email via the disaster recovery site with the minimal downtime. Let's also see the difference between high availability and the disaster recovery site. High availability protects you within the same site. That means like if you have a 2 or more Exchange server in a same building, if any one of them fails, the other takes over instantly and you don't face any downtime. But the disaster recovery is a kind of a protection between the two different sites. That means in a different location, your machines are in a different location. You can say that your second Exchange server is in another city or in another data center. And if the entire first site fails, the second one comes online. And the high availability keeps you running during a small issues, but the disaster recovery keeps you running during a big failures. Let's see the key components of planning the disaster recovery sites. Let's talk about the database availability group first, that is a DAG, and this is a backbone of the Exchange. The DAG allows mailbox databases to replicate across multiple servers and sites. You can always use a stretched DAG. That means one or more mailbox servers in the primary site and one or more in the disaster recovery site. You have a multiple Exchange server in both the sites, like on the primary site and on the disaster recovery site as well. Each mailbox database must have at least one passive copy in the disaster recovery site. And configure the DAG mode. It is very important if you are configuring the disaster recovery site. It prevents the database from mounting in the both sites at the same time. You can say that it avoids split brain issues. Always store a witness server in the third location. You can use the Azure or a file server outside of these sites. Think of a DAG like a safety net, and it keeps a synchronized copy of every mailbox database ready to activate when your main site fails. And the second key component is Active Directory. Exchange relies heavily on the Active Directory, and your disaster recovery site must have at least one writable domain controller, a global catalog server for user authentication, and ensure that AD replication between sites is healthy and on a fast, reliable link. You can create the separate AD sites and site links to manage replication efficiently. And one thing to note here is that if AD doesn't replicate, your disaster recovery Exchange can't authenticate the users, even if the server is running perfectly. So it is must to have the proper replication between both the sites. And the third key component is DNS. DNS plays an important role and it controls how user connects. You should plan namespace failover carefully. For example, like if you have a namespace mail.techijack.com, it should resolve to the disaster recovery Exchange when the main site is down. You can use the low TTL values, for example like 300 seconds, to make DNS failover faster. And if you have a split brain DNS, internal and external zone, replicate the same changes to the disaster recovery DNS servers as well. It will help us when the primary Exchange IP is unreachable. DNS automatically redirects user to the disaster recovery sites. Our fourth component is SSL certificates and URL. You have to use the same certificate on both sites for services like OVA, ECP, EWS, MAPI and ActiveSync. And make sure like both sites share the same namespace, for example like mail.techijack.com. You should also export and import the same SSL certificate to the disaster recovery site. And if you are using a load balancer, you have to replicate the SSL configuration on the disaster recovery site as well. Why this matters? If the disaster recovery site doesn't have the same SSL certificate, Outlook and mobile client will throw certificate error and refuse to connect, and you will not be able to connect to your inbox. Our fifth component is mail flow continuity. This ensures like inbound and outbound mail works during the failover. You have to configure the receive connector in the disaster recovery site as well. Set up the send connector to use both the main and disaster recovery site. Therefore, if you are using a mail gateway, configure both sides to reroute the message to the disaster recovery exchange automatically if something fails. For hybrid setups, make sure Exchange Online can still route mail to the disaster recovery if on-premises Exchange goes down. Even if the main Exchange is gone, new email should still arrive in the disaster recovery. No data loss or no bounce back should be there. Our sixth component is backup storage and data replication. Even with the DAG, backups are essential. DAGs handles the replication but not the retention. You should use a proper exchange-aware backup solution such as Veeam or Acronix. Periodically restore a mailbox or database to test the backup integrity. Replication keeps data alive, backups keep the data safe. And our seventh component is network and connectivity. Without network readiness, disaster recovery won't work. Both sides should have the redundant internet connection. Maintain the VPN tunnels or express route between them. You should have a proper routing set up between both the primary and the disaster recovery site. Replicate your firewall, NAT and the load balancer rule. And make sure the same ports are used, like for HTTPS it's 443.25, 587, 135 etc. are open in the both location. And you can use the identical external IPs and the proper DNS mapping to ensure seamless client failover, because failover will only work if you have a proper DNS mapping. If you mismatch with this DNS mapping, the failover won't work in a proper way. And our next component is testing and documentation, and this is the most ignored step but the most important one. Create a disaster recovery runbook to document all the failover steps so that anytime you need, you can see those steps and recall them. You should also test your disaster recovery site quarterly, like mounting database on the disaster recovery servers, verify Outlook, OVA and mail flow. If you have any problem with these steps, you can document the result and refine your plan after each test. If you have a disaster plan and you have never tested it, it's just a piece of a paper, not a protection. So it is recommended to test your disaster recovery solution so that at the point of failure you can have the things up and running instead of losing the connectivity and losing the business. With this plan, even if your primary exchange site goes completely offline, your users won't even notice and mail keeps flowing, Outlook stays connected and business continues. So it is very necessary to plan for the disaster recovery site for your exchange. Friends, want to level up your IT career with exclusive Exchange server and hybrid training? Join my YouTube membership for exclusive step-by-step training, real-world migration labs, and insider tips you won't find anywhere else. Explore the complete playlist for Exchange Microsoft courseware, where you will get the step-by-step Exchange Server 2019-2025 training, hybrid Exchange plus Microsoft 365 deep dives, advanced migration guides and real-world lab, members only question and answer, and early access content, and many more new content to come. See the serious members taking the benefit of course content and leveling up their IT career. Playlist and membership link is available in the description. So select the membership and join now to start mastering Exchange like pro.